Shabbat Shalom, and welcome to the Fellowship of Christian Goths Shabbat Parasha services. This week we are in Parasha, or portion 49, Ki Tetzi, which translates into English as When You Go Forth. The Torah reading is Deuteronomy chapter 21, verse 10 through chapter 25, verse 19. Now, as you know, it ends, our Torah reading for the year ends when we get to the end of Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy, I checked the other week, I believe it has like 34 chapters. We're already at chapter 25, and we read about 3 or 4 chapters a week. So 25 ends at 34, right? It's like, wow, so we're getting there really quickly. Who knows? Maybe I'm turning around numbers. Maybe it's 43. I think it was 34, but in a very short time, we're going to be there. All right. Then the Haftorah portion is Isaiah chapter 52, verse 13 through chapter 54, verse 10. And then in the Brit Hadashah, our Besoras, our Gospels, readings are Matthew chapter 5, verse 31 through 32. Well, it's just 2 verses there. And then chapter 19, verses 3 through 12, and chapter 22, verses 23 through 32. Then Luke chapter 23, verse 1 through 25. And then in our epistles, we have Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, chapter 5, verse 1 through 5, chapter 9, verse 4 through 18, and then Galatians, chapter 3, verse 9 through 14. As always, we start with candlelight prayer, which, it's been a few weeks since Amber said. How about this week? It's going to be said by Amber. How about that?
Gotta find it now.
How about the chat?
I know it's in the chat. I just gotta scroll up. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctifies us with your commandments and commands us to be a light to the world. Let light shine in the darkness.
Blessed are you, Yahuwah Elohim, King of the universe, who sanctifies us by your commandments, and who has given us your Torah, your teaching, your instruction, your wisdom, and your word, your path to salvation. Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus Christ, your living word. Yahuwah Elohim, Lord God, we pray. Now our eyes may be open to seeing your word, our ears open to hearing your word, our hearts open to having your words written on our hearts, our minds open to having your word ever before our mind, our mouths open to proclaiming your word, our hands open to carrying out your word as taught to us through your good Son, our shepherd, Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus Christ. Amen. So the first reading, the Torah portion, Deuteronomy chapter 21, verse 10 through chapter 25, verse 19. And, like it's been for the past few weeks, it's just going to give us a big list of, the commandments, but not as wordy as the original time it listed them. So, when you go out to war against your enemies, and Yahuwah, your Elohim, gives them into your hand, and you take them captive, and you see among the captives a beautiful woman, and you desire to take her to be your wife, and you bring her home to your house, she shall shave her head and pare her nails or cut short her fingernails. And she shall take off the clothes in which she was captured, and shall remain in your house and lament or cry her father and her mother a full month. So shall mourn the loss of them, because clearly you just killed them in this in this scenario. After that, you may go in to her and be her husband, and she shall be your wife. But if you no longer delight in her, you shall let her go where she wants. But you shall not sell her for money, nor shall you treat her as a slave, since you have humiliated her. So, whenever they would take people captive in war, as you've already heard, we've actually gone over that quite a bit of times. Sometimes if they were the Canaanites, for instance, they were supposed to kill all of them, just all of them, even the newborn infant. It was a real bloody, terrible thing. However, if they were not a Canaanite, but someone else that they went to war with, then they were to not kill the livestock, and they were also to not kill the virgin daughters. And of course, it sounds horrible, it sounds bloody, but you know what? If you look at, that was common practice in all ancient civilizations, just all of them. It's sad that things worked out that way, but that's how they did. So people might say, "Oh, see, God is condoning all this stuff. It's so terrible. Why would you follow Him?" But that's what atheists would say. But the thing is that you got to realize that He's commanding that you have to be more responsible than these other tribes. For instance, if we just look at the second part of this, it says you shall not sell her for money, nor shall you treat her as a slave, since you have humiliated her. That right there tells you what other peoples were doing, right? So what they were doing, and if we look into American history, we see that white slave owners did this a lot to African American slaves as well, and that is that they would have sex with their slave and then still treat her like a slave or sell her off. And what God is here saying is, no, 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 no. No, wait a minute here. If you capture these people in war, she's either your slave or she's the woman that you're sleeping with. She can't be both. That if you're having sex with this woman, she's your wife. Don't treat her like a slave. You shall not treat her like a slave at that point. You shall not sell her for money, even if you only have sex with her once, and then you don't want her anymore. Then you have to free her as a free citizen. You can't, you have to divorce her and free her as a free person. You don't enslave this woman. You don't do that. She's your wife. As for how this could be applied to modern day world, I mean, if one wanted to find a commandment to say that like prostitution might be a sin, this might be, you might be able to. It's not the prostitute who'd be sinning in this; it'd be the pimp who would be sinning in this. You realize, because he would be, the command: do not sell her for money, do not treat her as a servant. Okay, so I guess being a pimp might be a sin here. It seems to be, it could be applied that way, depending on how one wanted to interpret it and how one wanted to apply it to modern day life. So it doesn't seem to be outlawing the woman's part here, although there's other passages that we've read where it also says, don't turn your women into whores, don't turn your women into prostitutes. But again, that's really kind of outlawing pimping. But obviously, the Bible talks about being chaste until marriage and then not fornicating outside of marriage. And so if you're doing that, you're not really going to be doing prostitution either. That being said, as we know from whenever we read Genesis, Judah, he ended up having sex with his daughter-in-law who was pretending to be a prostitute so that she could have his children. And then the twins that she bore, one of them became the ancestor of King David and also the ancestor of Yeshua, the ancestor of Jesus. So, and the Bible doesn't say that she was committing a sin there. Now, of course, she wasn't actually a prostitute, though. She was pretending to be one. And remember, his response is she, whenever she's accused of prostituting, and then she proves that the only guy she had sex with was him, Judah says, she is more honorable than me. Because he broke a lot of commandments. Not necessarily the whole sleep with prostitute. That's not what I mean. I mean the whole not allowing his third son to marry her, and because that's how it was supposed to go. He denied her that husband. He denied her those children. So then he was breaking commandments. And then she, by tricking him into sleeping with her and then having the children, she was actually making him fulfill the commandment that he was supposed to be fulfilling, which he was refusing to. So, anyway, yeah, I want to move on from that, but, I had to mention it because, talking a little bit about something that could be interpreted as being about prostitution. So, if a man has two wives, the one loved and the other unloved, and both the loved and the unloved have borne him children, and if the firstborn son belongs to the unloved, then on the day when he assigns his possessions as an inheritance to his sons, he may not treat the son of the loved as the firstborn in preference to the son of the unloved, who is the firstborn. But he shall acknowledge the firstborn, the son of the unloved, by giving him a double portion of all that he has, for he is the first fruits of his strength. The right of the firstborn is his. So, this command here, as well as one that we did not read today, but which I stated today about the whole, if the husband dies, then the brother has to supply children from the woman. Those commandments show something that I've been saying since our very first Parasha. It's our very first reading of the year. And that is that a lot of people like to claim, oh, well, the commandments, those were given at Mount Sinai, and they say, see, they weren't eternal and that Christ done away with them and so on and so forth. But I point out, no, first of all, Christ says they're eternal. But second of all, if you go back and you relook all the way to the story of Cain and Abel, you will notice that throughout all of that time, they were following all of the commandments that were later given at Mount Sinai. What that tells us is that the commandments are eternal. They've existed since the beginning of time, and they will exist until the end of time. Yeshua says, until heaven and earth falls away, not the slightest part of the smallest commandment shall be done away with. So, until heaven and earth passes away. You know? But yeah, if you look, Cain and Abel are um, aware of the commandments. I don't want to say following it because they're following it, and then obviously Cain seriously breaks one of them. Thou shalt not kill, kills his brother. But then throughout the story, all the way down, we see that they're always obeying these commandments. In that, the story that I just told with Judah and his sons, which that's in Genesis. That's before Exodus. And in that story, his sons and him are having to obey if the husband dies without giving the woman children, then his brother and or next of kin relative has to supply her children. So, and that those children shall be considered to be the children of her husband who is dead. So they were following that, way back. Judah is one of the sons of Jacob and one of the sons of Israel. So now here with this commandment that we just read about if one of the wives is loved and one of the wives is unloved, that also is one that we see in the story of Jacob, the story of Israel. For he had technically 4 wives. He had Leah, Rachel, or no, Rebecca, Rachel. Leah, Rachel, Rebecca was his mother, by the way. So Leah, Rachel, and then there were their servants. There was Zelpha, the servant of Leah, and there was Bella, the servant of Rachel. And Leah was the unloved one, but had children first. And Rachel was the loved one that had children later. So you see, this commandment that we just read is literally talking about that exact circumstance. And then also, before that, with his grandfather, with Abraham. So Abraham, of course, he had Sarah, and through Sarah, he had Isaac. We have to remember that before that, he had a son through Sarah's servant, Agar, and that they had Ishmael. Okay? So you see there, and then you'll remember that whenever Sarah asked him to send Agar away and send Ishmael away, and she wanted him to send them away to die of thirst in the desert. He was very mournful. Abraham was really distraught and destroyed over that. And then the Almighty heard Agar and Ishmael crying out that they were dying of thirst, and he led them to the well that Abraham had dug years earlier. And then, going back to Jacob with Leah and Rachel, although Jacob preferred Rachel, and he preferred Rachel's children of Joseph and Benjamin, that did not negate Leah's children of of Reuben, Levi, Judah, so on and so forth, right? And the fact that Judah, which is the line of the Messianic line, that's the line of David, the line of Yeshua, the fact that that comes from the unloved mother, from Leah, right? So you see there, it's like, well, wait a minute here. Abraham and Jacob, those are both in Genesis, right? That's long before Moses. That's 400 years, actually, well over. In case of Abraham, it's more like 500 years. Yeah, it's like 500 years before the giving of the law at Mount Sinai. So what that tells you is that the law was just restated or renewed at Mount Sinai. And that's something that we saw throughout Scripture, how Adam and Eve, they They broke some commandments, right? They sinned. And then you had Cain and Abel, and then later Seth. They made sacrifices to the Almighty, renewing or restoring their covenant with God. They teshuvah, they returned to God, right? And of course, Cain did it with the wrong intention, and his was not accepted. And because remember, Cain did not give the best of his offerings, so his was rejected. And then he killed Abel, and then Abel was replaced by Seth, the birth of Seth. And then you'll remember that multiple times Abraham kept saying, Lord, I'll follow you. And then he really messed up bad. And then, Lord, I repent. I turned, I teshuvah, I returned to you. And then it was said, and so God renewed his covenant with Abraham. And then Abraham screwed up again. And then he turned back to God. And so God renewed his covenant with Abraham. And so on and so forth. And then it was the same way with all of them. And it's the same way at Mount Sinai. That wasn't the beginning of the covenant. That was the renewal of the covenant. And same way with the New Testament, the Brit Hadashah. Remember, that could be translated as either the New Testament or the New Witness or the Renewed Witness, or it could also be the New Covenant or new and renewed, or the same word, the renewal of the covenant. As I point out, if you look at Scripture, it's always the renewal of the same covenant. That's getting renewed again and again, even before Yeshua, before Jesus, and after Sinai, right? Think about how they kept falling into idolatry, right? They got captured by the Assyrians and the Babylonians. And then they returned to God, they teshuvah, and he restored them. He brought them back into the land, and he renewed their covenant. He renewed his covenant with them again. That's in Nehemiah, or if you're in the Septuagint and or the original Jewish text, that's part 2 of Ezra, because Nehemiah and Ezra are one book in both the Jewish text and the Septuagint. So God has kept renewing his covenant throughout the history of all of creation. But it's the same covenant, and it existed long before Sinai. And that is shown by the fact that in Genesis, long before Sinai, everyone who's following God is following all 613 commandments. So, and this is an example there. And I will, before I move on, which I'm about to do, I'm just going to reread it again. Now you have the context of it. If a man has 2 wives, the one loved and the other unloved, and both the loved and the unloved have borne him children, and if the firstborn son belongs to the unloved, then on the day when he assigns his possessions as an inheritance to his sons, he may not treat the son of the loved as the firstborn and prefers the son of the unloved, who is the firstborn. But he shall acknowledge the firstborn, the son of the unloved, by giving him a double portion of all that he has, for he is the firstborn, is the first fruits of his strength. The right of the firstborn is his. See, now you know about the whole thing with Abraham and also with Jacob. Yep, they were definitely following that. And if I wanted to, I could probably talk about divorces and stepchildren. I don't feel I need to really get into that too much, but obviously things apply there with first having your children, a guy having children with a woman in his youth, and then not being with her, and then getting with another woman and marrying her and having children with her. That says that he should not neglect his earlier children, obviously. So, all right. If a man has a stubborn and rebellious son, I referred to this next one last week. or the week before. I forget which week it was. You guys remember last week or the week before when I talked about, taking the child to the center of town and stoning your child to death? Here it is. If a man has a stubborn and rebellious son who will not obey the voice of his father or the voice of his mother, and though they discipline him, will not listen to them, then his father and his mother shall take hold of him and bring him out to the elders of his city at the gate of the place where he lives. And they shall say to the elders of his city, this our son is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey our voice. He is a glutton and a drunkard. Then all the men of the city shall stone him to death. Shall stone him to death with stones. So you shall purge the evil or the evil one from your midst, and all Israel shall hear and fear, or hear and honor. I actually explained this in full here last week or the week before. Try not to go in as much detail. I will try to sum up what I said a week or two ago. Yeah, this sounds, pretty harsh, but you got to remember that the father and the mother, and maybe even one of the grandparents, because 2 or 3 witnesses, had to publicly accuse this child. The child had to have already been at least 13 years old. They had to have already read the entire Bible all the way through and written out the entire Bible all the way through. So for a fact they knew all the commands, and they had to have already agreed to obey all the commandments. So having already read all of them and fully agreed to following all of them, and they can't say, oh, I didn't read it, because they wrote it out, right? After having done that, and you got to realize, 13 years old, you were already an adult at that time, period. You were considered an adult, right? And so you're already considered an adult, and you'd read all of them, you'd agreed to follow all of them, and then both of the parents, because on account of 2 or 3 witnesses, so both parents, plus maybe a grandparent, had to accuse this child, and they had to want, to accuse them, you had to have wanted to stone them to death. They had to agree that had to have been their desire of all 2 or 3 of these people. And then they had to go to the elders of the community, lay out this accusation. The elders is another way of saying the judges. And then the judges also had to agree that this child was to be stoned to death. And only then could the child be stoned to death. And the first people to cast a stone, as we read in last week's commandments, had to be the accuser, which meant had to be the parents. It specifically said the mother and the father. They had to cast the first stone there. And of course, if the court found the child to be innocent, as we read in the commandments last week, then the parents would have been stoned to death. Right? And if the child had not read all the Bible or not agreed to follow it, then you can't charge the child with not obeying laws they never agreed to follow. Right? So, there you go. So no parents were not going around killing their children left and right. As I said last week or the week before, I guarantee you the number of children who were killed by this was probably close to 0. Very unlikely. So we're moving on. And if a man has committed a crime punishable by death, and he is put to death, and you hang him on a tree, or else, as I've said before, when we come across that line, hang him on a tree, that could be hung, that could be crucified, it could be impaled. His body shall not remain all night on the tree, but you shall bury him the same day. For a hanged man is cursed by Elohim. You could also say a crucified man or an impaled man is cursed by Elohim. You shall not defile your land that Yahuwah your Elohim is giving you for an inheritance. So you shall not leave people up hung in rows or impaled in rows or crucified in rows as a intimidation tactic to make people obey you, because that was done a lot back then. And I told you before a few weeks ago how Nero, the Roman emperor, how he and Diocletian and several others, how they had taken Christians and covered them in tar and crucified them and or impaled them and then lit them on fire and had their corpses burning for 3 days or a week, the bones covered in tar just burning and the human fat burning. It was nasty. It was an intimidation tactic saying, don't be a Christian, And they did that. Before that, Rome did that to Jews as well. In fact, in the case of Nero, he was doing that to Jews and Christians. Diocletian was doing it mostly to Christians. Nero was doing it to both. And, there were other emperors and other people who did that as well. And throughout history, there's been Christian rulers who did similar things, and Muslim rulers, we're talking about more recent, who, they would impale someone and leave their rotting corpse for months, as a sign, don't disobey the leader. So this commandment is saying, don't do that. It's saying you're to take them down and to bury them. Now, so that being said, another interesting line here that is especially applicable to Christians is it said, for a hanged man or a crucified or an impaled man is cursed by Elohim. In Isaiah, which we're probably going to read that in Isaiah today, in Isaiah, it also talks about that. And it talks about how, in Christian interpretations of it, how Yeshua, how Jesus, how the Messiah is considered by the people to be cursed by God. And of course, that's because he was crucified. He was a hung man, right? But then if you also notice in the Bible and Scripture, as the evening of the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread is approaching, how then they take him down before that, and so he doesn't stay up for more than one day. So at least at least that follows with this as well. So you see it. This whole command has a lot of implications for Christianity and Yeshua and views of him. In fact, in some second century Jewish writings about Jesus, these of course would be writings by Jews who rejected him as the Messiah, who consider him not to be the Messiah. One of the reasons that some of them give for him not being the Messiah is they said, well, a hanged man is cursed by Elohim, is cursed by God. Therefore, the Messiah can't possibly, someone who dies of crucifixion can't possibly be the Messiah. That is their excuse that they give. And, for those, because as you know, a lot of modern day Jews do not accept Yeshua, Jesus, as the Messiah. And that is one of the reasons given. And all the reasons given is that their understanding of the Messiah was that he had to be a man who was considered honorable. Obviously, if you were crucified, you weren't considered honorable. He had to be someone who defeated any foreign power that was that had power over Judea. And so obviously, since he did not, before his crucifixion, defeat the Roman Empire that had power over Judea, they don't consider him the Messiah for that. And then he had to have been crowned, king on earth of an earthly kingdom. Because Messiah means, anointed one, but king, Messiah, son of David, means king. So by their definition of that, he couldn't be the Messiah. Now, of course, his followers, who later became called Christians or anointed ones, they looked at Isaiah and they interpreted several passages of Isaiah as possibly indicating that the Messiah was going to be a man who was hated, who was held in disgust, who people considered him to be cursed, and who would die on a cross or stake or hung in some way. And so obviously with that interpretation of the Messiah, he fits that interpretation. We move on to the next commandments. You shall not see your brother's ox or his sheep going astray and ignore them. You shall take them back to your brother. And if he does not live near you, and you do not know who he is, you shall, which that tells you it's not your biological brother, it's saying your fellow man. You shall bring it home to your house, and it shall stay with you until your brother seeks it. Then you shall restore it to him. And you shall do the same with his ass, or with his garment, or with any lost thing of your brother's, which he loses and you find. You may not ignore it. You shall not see your brother's ass or his ox fallen down by the way and ignore them. You shall help him to lift them up again. So these commandments here highlight two virtues. One obvious one is that if you're giving it back to them, you're not keeping it for yourself. So clearly you're not stealing, right? Another one is that if you find it on the ground, you try your best to return it to them. So not just don't steal, but if you find something that's lost, do your best to return it. And if you don't know whose it is, keep asking around and keep it protected until you find out whose it is. And then if you find out whose it is, give it to them. Right? And then the other moral aspect of these commandments is, and we've covered this a few times before, God shows a great love for animals in his commandments. It says, don't mistreat animals. Don't butcher them incorrectly so as to cause them suffering. Don't eat a limb off of a living animal, and all those things like that, right? And this here, shows that if you find a lost animal, you are to help it not be lost. If you find an animal that has fallen and your fellow man is trying to get this animal out of a ditch, you are to help rescue the animal out of a ditch. So it's showing great love and mercy and assistance to animals that are in need. That's a very beautiful moral thing there. We're not to mistreat animals. It's very clear. We're to treat them humanely and properly and right. And as you saw, it also mentioned, though, about someone's garment or else what else was it? Or else anything else they'd lost. It said. So yeah, so if you find their lost wallet or a lost glove, or a lost umbrella, right? You're to try and help and restore it to them. Back many years ago on my 10-year high school reunion, it was raining, and my friend Kaylee, she had accidentally left her umbrella at the place where our reunion was. So I took the umbrella home, and then I asked Kaylee, she lives in Los Angeles. I asked her, hey, do you want me to mail the umbrella to you? Because I'm way over here in Arizona, northern Arizona. I'm pretty far away. And she responded, no, it was just a cheap umbrella. Keep it. So I still have it. In about 1 year from now will be my 20-year high school reunion. I plan on bringing the umbrella, and if I see her, I'll go, here's your umbrella. She'll be like, what? It's just some cheap umbrella. But, it's a little funny story I wanted to tell. So, yeah, try your best to return. But, that what that story says is I tried my best to return the thing. She didn't want it. So I'm still going to, as a joke, return it. Uh, you know, so yeah, so that commandment, don't steal, return something that you find, and look after and take care of animals. Moving on with the commandments. A woman shall not wear a man's garment, nor shall a man put on a woman's cloak. For whoever does these things is an abomination to Yahuwah your Elohim. And again, we've read all these commandments before, right? A few books ago, we read this very same commandment. It's no shocker. Now, because we're goths, we know that sometimes norms who like to think that we're evil and Satanists and devil worshippers and covered in sin, and constantly, purposely sinning and living a life of sin, sometimes they like to throw this commandment into the faces of the male members of our culture. And, we have to defend ourselves because we're not breaking this commandment. And so, that being the case, I shall here explain how Goth men are not breaking this commandment. All right. So, some people will say, oh, well, if you wear a skirt, then if you're a man and you wear a skirt, well, then you're sinning. Oh, really? Jesus didn't wear pants. Neither did Abraham, Isaac, or Jacob. They all wore robes, which, are like dresses, basically. So, and in Egypt, I mean, both Moshe and Joseph, they wore ones that just went from the waist to the knee. Well, that's a skirt. So were they breaking this command? Well, no, that was that time. No, we're in our time. Yeah, but Goths aren't the same culture as standard Americans. So to say, well, we're Americans. For your man, you gotta wear pants. Yeah, well, I'm sorry. I'm a Goth. And considering that after Columbine, this country falsely imprisoned me and many of my Gothic friends and tortured us, no, I'm not an American. I don't like America at all. I'm not a patriot of America. Okay, I follow its laws because Bible says we should follow the laws of the country we're in. And besides, as I pointed out, as long as in previous I pointed out, the Bible makes it very clear that if the laws aren't going against God, they're to keep some kind of an order. And it's good, it's good to, like, for instance, not drive 100 miles per hour in a 45 miles per hour zone, because if you love yourself and you love your fellow man, driving that fast, not showing, then you're not loving yourself and you're not loving your fellow man. Therefore, even though there's no commandment saying drive 45 in a 45, obviously if you're endangering, if that law was put in place by man for safety reasons, when you break that law, you're hating yourself and you're hating your fellow man. You're not loving yourself or your fellow man properly, and therefore, right? So I follow the laws of this country, but no, I do not consider myself an American. This country brutalized the people of my culture. All right. So the whole thing of, well, we're in America, and in America, men wear pants. I'm not an American. I'm a Goth. Gothic men don't have to wear pants. So take that. The Bible does not say that men have to wear pants, especially because back whenever all those passages were being written, men did not wear pants. Right? All right. By that same token, if you look at in the 1960s, whenever women started wearing pants in the United States, it was very controversial. Because those women in the 1960s in the United States who started wearing pants, they were accused of cross-dressing, of dressing like men, because women were to wear dresses and skirts. They were not to wear pants. And that a woman wearing pants was cross-dressing, and therefore was, according to those people in the 1950s United States, or sorry, 1960s United States, according to those people, those women were breaking this commandment and were sinning, right? Now, of course, you say to most people today, well, it's a sin for women to wear pants. A lot of women will tell you to, shut up, and will tell you you're an idiot. But how can they make that claim? Well, because times have changed, and they are women's pants that they're wearing, and it is perfectly acceptable for women to wear pants and not be considered cross-dressing, even though go back, 70 years ago now to 1950, and yes, in the 1950s, for a woman to wear pants, she was considered to be cross-dressing in this country. All right. So what that tells you is that what is considered men's fashion and what is considered women's fashion is dependent on the culture and the time. Okay? Therefore, Goths, what is considered cross-dressing or not cross-dressing, is under what would be considered dressing like a woman or dressing like a man in the Goth culture. Modern day United States American culture has no say on what's cross-dressing for a Goth. They just don't. Especially since some of their points are validated by clothing worn by Jesus himself or by Abraham, right? So, in Gothic culture, when a man wears a makeup, he's not considered to be cross-dressed. When a man wears a skirt, I'm not just talking about a kilt either, I'm talking about a skirt, he is not cross-dressing. There's even men's dresses, which again is no more different than robes like worn by Jesus or Abraham. Okay? And I own some skirts that I bought back in like 2002 from Gothic websites. I bought these skirts in the men's section. They're not women's skirts. They are men's skirts. Right? And same with Goth makeup. That's a unisex thing. That's worn by everyone. Right? So if that does not distinguish, dressing like a man or dressing like a woman, then what does? Right? That's a good question. Okay, well, if by that, then does that make this commandment irrelevant? No, it does not. Does that mean that you just now destroyed this commandment? No, I did not. This commandment is still in effect, as all the commandments are, And this command is to be followed. Okay, so then if what makes someone considered as cross-dresser or not is culturally dependent, what is an aspect of that that is not culturally dependent, that goes across all cultures? Very simple. It's not complicated at all. Ready for it? It is, as with all the commandments, the intent is in purpose. Right? It's going by the faith and the spirit, right? Right? You're supposed to go by the spirit of the commandment, the spirit of the law, right? That's to go by the faith of the law, right? All right. So what is the faith? What is the spirit? What is the intent here? What's it saying, right? Because remember, you could do every single word of every commandment, but if your heart is in the wrong place, it's like as if you just slapped God in the face, right? So it has to have the right faith behind it. It has to have the right intention. The intention of this commandment is very, very clear. It's if a woman, well, it says, a woman shall not wear a man's garment, nor shall a man put on a woman's cloak, for whoever does these things is an abomination to Yahuwah your Elohim. So, what that means then is if the woman is purposely trying to pass herself off as a man, or the man is purposely trying to pass himself off as a woman. See, when I wear a men's skirt and Gothic men's makeup styles, I am in no way trying to pass myself off as a woman. I am not trying to dress as a woman. I'm not trying to look like a woman. I'm not trying to be mistaken for a woman. I'm not trying to deceive someone, because deceiving someone, that's saying deeply at the heart of this sin, is trying to deceive someone or fool someone into having maybe lustful feelings for someone of the same gender as them. Okay, that's really at heart here. Usually this commandment, whenever it was mentioned the previous time in scripture, I should say, so usually it is paired next to, and the previous time it was mentioned, is paired next to, a man shall not have sex with a man in the same way they have sex with a woman. Then the next, very close after, says a man shall not dress as a woman, nor a woman as a man. So it's about deceiving someone, trying to trick someone of the same gender to have sex with you, or to even lust after you. So now I can't control what they're feeling, right? I have someone lusts after me on them. But am I trying to deceive them into thinking that I am a woman when I'm not? So, no, whenever I dress in a men's skirt and put on men's makeup and a man's wig, right? And, men's high-heeled shoes, let's say. No, I'm not trying to look like a woman. I'm trying to look like a really cool, really hot man that hopefully women will really like. Get myself a nice wife, right? So that is the difference there. What this commandment is forbidding is for me to try and pass myself off as a woman, or for a woman to try and pass herself off as a man. So could this commandment be understood as forbidding being transgender? You might want to interpret it that way. That might be a valid interpretation. I don't like to necessarily try and rule out all possibilities, but that's definitely one possible way of interpreting this. Is obviously then for a man to become a trans woman and pass himself off as a woman, or a woman to become a trans man and pass herself off as a man. Is this forbidding that? I would say it looks like it does forbid that. Yeah, I I would say that's what it looks to be what it's saying. you know, and you know, I know some modern day people don't like the fact that I might say that, but again, I did not write this. I'm only telling you what it says, and you gotta remember that I consider this to be of similar weight to eating shellfish because it says, "For whoever does these things is an abomination to Yahuwah your Elohim." What it says here, right? What does it say? It says, "You shall not eat shellfish, for it is an abomination to Yahuwah Elohim." So, do I consider being a trans man or a trans woman a sin? Yes, but I consider it to be just as much of a sin as eating shrimp or lobster. So, right? So, as I pointed out before, do I think that this country should make a law, the United States should make a law banning, uh, people from being trans? Well, do I think this country should make a law banning people from eating shrimp? No. You know why? People have free will. They can choose not to follow God. If someone wants to mutilate themselves, it's terrible, and God really recommends that you don't do it. But if you want to mutilate yourself or you want to deceive people, that's bad. You shouldn't do it. But if you're choosing not to follow God anyway, as Paul said last week or week before, we're not to judge those outside of the church. So, okay, right? In the same way, do I think that they should ban eating shrimp? No, right? Do I think we should walk up to trans people and stick our finger in their face and say, "You're a sinner"? Well, only if you want to also walk up to people eating a ham sandwich and stick your finger in their face and say, "You're a sinner." If you do that to someone who's eating a ham sandwich, they're probably going to punch you in the face. Same way, if you do that to a trans person, they might just punch you in the face. Probably shouldn't be walking up to people and sticking your finger in their face, right? Chances are a trans person knows that the Bible has something against, the way they've chosen to live their life. So they probably don't even have to be informed of it. And so, yeah. But yes, if someone want to know, does God consider, a man trying to pass himself off as a woman, or a woman trying to pass herself off as a man to be a sin? Yes, it does. It does. That being said, are Gothic men dressing in our beautifully Gothic way of dressing? Is that breaking this commandment? No, it is not. Okay? Just in the same way that if a Gothic woman wears black PVC pants, I'm not going to call her a sinner for wearing pants. That being said, if you ask me, I do think that it's more typical in the Gothic fashion for women to wear skirts and dresses. They normally wear them, about 85% of the time. So Gothic women do wear skirts and dresses a lot more than norm women do, but it's not unusual that every once in a while see a goth girl in leather or PVC pants. It happens, right? I don't think she's cross-dressing because again, it's what is her intention? Is she trying to come off as a man? So that's an important way to remember this commandment and whether a Gothic man is breaking it or not. Is what is his intention? All right. I know for just one sentence, I really had to go in deep on that, but it's a really important issue to Gothic men. I had to go deep in it. All right. Next commandment. If you come across a bird's nest in any tree or on the ground with young ones or eggs, and the mother sitting on the young or on the eggs, you shall not take the mother with the young. You shall let the mother go, but the young you may take for yourself, that it may go well with you, and that you may live long. So this is another one of those commandments where God is saying, don't abuse animals and show great care for other creatures that God has created beyond humans, extended to animals. So God is saying here, right? He is saying that, if you see a bird with some eggs or some chicks, right? And you want to eat those eggs, for instance, that you are not to kill the mother along with the eggs and eat both the bird and the chicks. And you're also not to take those eggs while the bird is there. You're to shoo her away from the nest. And that's actually God commanding us to show mercy, compassion, and love for mother animals. It extends beyond birds as well. There's other commandments that give a similar command regarding oxen, and cows and stuff, and sheep. So the commandment is pretty clear, and that is that we're to show compassion for them, because in the Talmud it actually gives a great commentary on this, and that is multiple rabbis in the Talmud say, and I agree with them in this analysis. That is, they say that this commandment and the other commandment that I just referred to, that they are there because animals do have emotion, animals can feel sorrow, and animals feel sorrow and distress at someone kidnapping their children and or killing their children in front of them. It makes them greatly distressed. And the rabbis say that the distress that the animals feel from that is the same distress that a human mother feels from that. Therefore, if you don't want, to kidnap a human woman's child or have your child kidnapped, nor do you want your child killed in front of you, right? That we should have some respect for and understanding that to kill the animal or else to rip open the eggs and suck them dry in front of a bird is heartless and cruel. And therefore, before taking an animal to be slaughtered, or before taking the egg, shoo the mother away so that she doesn't have to witness that. She's still going to be somewhat stressed, returns back, her eggs are gone, and be stressed, where's my calf? Where's my calf? She's going to miss her calf, right? So it's still going to be stressful, but you're reducing that stress. You're reducing it as much as possible. You're showing some kind of compassion for these animals. And that shows God's great love for all of his creation, right? So, it's real beautiful. And, in talking about animal cruelty and stuff like that, now, as you know, the Bible does not forbid the eating of meat. It allows us to eat meat, all right? That being said, the Bible does not forbid being a vegetarian either. So if you have extra care for animals and you wish to be a vegetarian, that's fine. God's not forbidding you from doing that. So you're allowed to be a vegetarian if you want. You're allowed to be a fruitarian if you want. That would be having compassion towards plants. Plants are living things too, right? And a fruitarian is someone who they only eat things that plants naturally drop off, and therefore they're things that you can eat without harming the plant. And that nuts and legumes also count as fruit. So fruits, nuts, legumes, these things are all things that can be eaten without harming plants. So the Bible does not forbid being a fruitarian if you don't want to hurt plants or animals. The Bible does not forbid being vegan if you want to just hurt plants but not hurt animals, right? And the Bible does not forbid eating meat if you want to eat meat, but it does forbid certain types of cruelty to animals, such as slaughtering them by bludgeoning them, by hitting them repeatedly. It forbids that. You got to kill the animal in one blow, okay? And it forbids, taking the young from their mother while their mother is present, right? And it forbids eating part of a living creature and, other things. So there are restrictions there. And then, of course, the Bible also said, and when I say forbid, again, these are suggestions from God. We have free will, okay? Yeah. It's God telling us how to love our fellow creation and not abuse them, how to care for other things. And then, and God's also wanting us to care about our own health and well-being. He also says what animals he suggests that we don't eat because they have poisonous or toxic flesh, such as pork or shellfish. They have parasites and they have lots of toxins in them. Again, if someone wants to eat them, hey, it's just God's advice on what he thinks we should stay away from. We don't want to follow his advice, it's on us. Okay. So, this commandment about, birds and their nests, it's God showing great compassion for animals and saying that we should be compassionate for their plight as well. And you'll notice at the end of this commandment, it says that in doing this, it says that it may go well with you and that you may live long. You see that in a lot of the commandments, a lot of them. It's God says that if we follow them, that our lives shall go well or better, and we shall hopefully have long lives. So, see? So apparently being good to animals, we get the blessing and not the curse when we're good to animals. Next group of commandments. When you build a new house, you shall make a parapet for your roof, that you may not bring the guilt of blood upon your house if anyone should fall from it. So make a sturdy roof. Because if you don't make a sturdy roof and someone falls off of it or through it and dies, that's on you, right? Said the guilt of blood, right? It's on you. And remember, then you could also be charged for manslaughter at that point, and then you'd have to go and take refuge in one of those cities of refuge, and then you'd have to stay there until the high priest died, because until then, if you left there, then the family of that person who died, they could kill you, right? But then if you stay there until after the high priest dies, then you're fine and you're safe. So, remember, talking about blood guilt. Anyway. You shall not sow your vineyard with two kinds of seed, lest the whole yield be forfeited, the crop that you have sown and the yield of the vineyard. You shall not plow with an ox and an ass together. You shall not wear clothes of wool and linen mixed together. So that there's 3 commandments, 3 totally separate commandments there that I just read. So the first of those 3 that I just read. So that means that, when you plant an area of, let's say, for instance, corn, even though corn's a New World crop, it wouldn't have been in that part of the world at the time. I could say wheat. Fine, I'll say wheat, because wheat was there. If you plant a crop of wheat in one area, and then in a different area, plant a crop of lettuce, that's fine. But if you plant lettuce and wheat next to each other, or right, like interspersed, mixed with one another in the field, that you're not supposed to do that. That is a sin to do that. Okay? And I know quite a bit of Torah observant gardeners, and they separate what they grow in order that they don't break this commandment. And as for reasons for this commandment, well, one reason is, so for instance, let's take the whole wheat and lettuce example that I just gave. So lettuce, until it gets much older, it stays pretty short. When it gets older, lettuce can be like 6 feet tall. I know it's weird for people to imagine it that way, but I've grown lettuce that tall. But usually before lettuce gets that old, you pluck it up, right? You don't let lettuce get that old. The reason why you don't let lettuce get that old is because your 6 foot tall lettuce is very, very, very bitter. I like bitter things. I'm okay with eating older lettuce, but normally when you eat lettuce, it's a baby. Okay? And yes, I'm a gardener. And wheat, though, of course, you let wheat get pretty tall, right? If you plant your wheat next to your lettuce, you know what happens, right? Either whenever your wheat gets tall, it takes up all the shade and all your lettuce dies, you'll lose half of what you planted. You lose all your lettuce. Well, you don't want that. That's a curse. That's a famine, isn't it? Or else, if whenever your lettuce is still young, if it spreads out its leaves, takes up all the space for where the wheat is coming up, then it takes away all the light from the wheat, and then you got a bunch of lettuce, all your wheat's dead. Well, that's not going to work either. That's a famine again, right? So whenever you plant crops, you don't want to lose some of your crops due to the fact that they're next to crops that just don't work with them. Or, for example, certain crops use up a lot of the nutrients in your soil, right? So if you plant 2 types of crops that both use up a lot of nutrients, what you're going to end up with is both of them, before they become ripe, they're both using up the nutrients, then they're both going to use up all the nutrients, and all your crop is going to die. All of them. Complete and utter loss, whole family. So, clearly, you don't want to mix 2 different types of seed, right? So there you go. It's logic there, right? Keep your crops divided. All right. The Almighty has great wisdom there. Makes perfect sense. And, there is a modern day way of mixing certain crops together that work together. It's called companion crops, as opposed to ones that do not go together real well. But, probably best to just keep them separate. There you go. So that's that commandment. Then the next commandment that was there was, you shall not plow with an ox and an ass together. The reason for that is that, you can plow with an ox and you can plow with an ass. But if you plow with them together, they have different strides, different paces, all those things like that. And so trying to plow with an ox and an ass together it's not going to work out well. You know, half your plow is moving at a different pace than the other half, right? And with a different strength than the other half. And then because the one animal is at a different strength and a different pace than the other one, then the one animal that is stronger of the two might get frustrated with the other animal, and you might have like your ox gore your ass. It might stab your ass to death because it might get frustrated with your ass, right? Or else you might then have your ass kick your ox, and you know it might blind your ox, might stick out an eye or something, right? So it's best to have it either be two oxes or two asses, all right? There you go. Also, as you may remember from other commandments, there was also a commandment about do not try and crossbreed animals that are distantly related. And that might have a small effect on this one as well, in that you don't want your ass to try and have sex with your ox or vice versa. That's an abomination. And then, you know, either both are killed or else, you know, it's not good. Don't do that. You know, right? So there you go. So then the third of this group of commandments that we read was, you shall not wear clothing of wool and linen mixed together. So a lot of modern day people break this commandment. A lot of modern day clothing mixes together wool and linen. A whole lot of them do. So here's some aspects of this commandment. So by wool, it means any fabric that is made from the hair of animals. So it's not just talking about sheep. You know, rabbit hair, goat hair, any kind of animal hair thread. That's what it means by wool. By linen, it means any fabric that is made from plants, such as cotton. Okay? So that's what it means by wool and linen. As for why it is forbidding that, there are several reasons. I'm going to list at least one of them for you guys. Some of them that I know are out there, I haven't read in a while, so I can't remember all of the possible reasons given for why. But the main one, the main reason that's given, is actually part of the very next commandment. Sometimes, depending on how you interpret it, and that's this. So if we go back to Leviticus and we read some of the commandments in there, for the clothing to be worn by the priests and the fabric that the temple curtains and all the curtains that made up the tabernacle, all of those fabrics were to be made up of a mixture of wool and linen. So that means that fabrics that were made of a mixture of the two, those were set apart. Those were holy garments. Those were things reserved for religious items, like the clothing of the priests or the temple curtain or all of the fabric of the cloth temple of the tabernacle, right? So that is one of the main reasons given, is that that mixture is set apart. It's holy. It's not mundane. It's not ordinary. Okay? Now, putting that into effect, we'll read the next commandment. You shall make yourself tassels on the four corners of the garment with which you cover yourself. Okay? Now, there are differing views on what these tassels should be made of, except for in the In the longer version of this commandment, which we already read several months ago, it does specify that, of course, one of the tassels is to be blue, and the rest, it doesn't say a color for, which some interpret that to mean that they're to be white, but it could also be other colors possibly. It's just one is definitely blue, right? So some people believe and interpret that for all of our ordinary clothing, we're not to mix wool and linen together in the same garment, because that's what it says. That's not an interpretation issue that it directly says. But here's the interpretation. They say the one exception to that is your tzitzit. For those watching the video, you'll see it right now. I'm showing tassels, a garment for covering oneself with 4 tassels with a blue thread and the rest of the thread is white. This garment, 4-cornered garment for covering oneself. Some believe that the tzitzit should or even must be made from wool and linen. Like, for instance, that the white threads are made of linen and that the blue threads are made of blue dyed wool. Okay? And the reason for that is that this is a holy garment. Therefore, it is to be a mixture of the two. Others, however, believe that that mixture of the two is just for the priestly garment. So I wanted to mention that. But, for Christians, we believe that we are a royal priesthood through Christ, right? So if we're all part of a royal priesthood, there you go. And that would possibly be a Christian text that shows that your tzitzit should be wool and linen. So there you go. So, but other than religious garments, we are not to wear a mixture of wool and linen, because that mixture is set apart. It is holy. That's not to be mixed with the profane. So there we go. That's the reason for that. By the way, the Hebrew term for that forbidden mixture is called shatnez. I might be mispronouncing it, but shatnez. That is clothing made of wool and linen. Shatnez. The tags on your clothing will tell you whether something is made of wool and linen or just linen or just wool. Okay? There we go. Before I continue on, I should say just a small little bit more about tzitzit. So this, if you remember, these commandments are the shortened summary. So, like, for instance, this one didn't mention a blue thread at all, but the longer one does. And this one also doesn't say why you're to wear them. The longer one does. It says that we are to wear these every day, tzitzit, to wear them every day as a reminder of the commandment. And by the way, the knots and the windings in tzitzit, if you add them all up, it comes out to be 613. That's all the commandments. So there you go. And the blue is to remind you of the sovereignty of God, that God's royalty, that God is Lord, God's King of Kings, Lord of Lords, and God is to be the Elohim, the mighty one in your life. So that's the meaning with the blue there. So, wanted to point that out. Now, I've noticed that for myself and for a lot of us goths, we have a tendency to wear ones that are colored like this, which this, now I'm showing now, for those who can see it, is blue and red tzitzit. And as for what importance the red has. I've actually told that in the past. That if you look throughout Scripture, the scarlet thread is really important too. Um, and so a lot of Goths wear ones with scarlet thread, which interestingly enough um, is an aspect of the priestly ones. Because priestly ones are blue, purple, and red. But there's other meaning. Red's very important, has lots of deep spiritual meaning. I'm not going to go into detail about that now. Like a month and a half, 2 months ago, I went into great detail on it. So no need to go on it again. All right. If any man takes a wife and goes into her, that means to have sex with her. I love the wording sometimes in scripture here, right? If any man takes a wife and goes in to her, goes in to her. Yeah, yeah, that means exactly what you think it means. In fact, I'll tell you this. That goes into her in Hebrew. It has references to the man being the thrusting and the woman being the hole that is thrusted into. So a lot of modern day English translates it as goes into her. Yeah. Yeah, sure. Wink, wink. Yes, that's exactly what it means. Yeah. So if any man takes a wife and goes into her and then hates her and accuses her of misconduct and bringing a bad name upon her, saying, I took this woman, and when I came near her, I did not find in her evidence of virginity, then the father of the young woman and her mother shall take and bring out the evidence of her virginity to the elders of the city in the gate. And the father and the young woman shall say to the elders, I gave my daughter to this man to marry, and he hates her. And behold, he has accused her of misconduct, saying, I did not find in your daughter evidence of virginity. And yet, this is the evidence of my daughter's virginity. And they shall spread the cloak before the elders of the city. Then the elders of the city shall take the man and whip him or discipline him, and they shall fine him 100 shekels, a shekel being 2/5 of an ounce or 11 grams of silver. That's a lot of money. 100 shekels of silver, that's a lot. And give them to the father of the young woman, because he has brought a bad name upon a virgin of Israel or a maiden of Israel, a woman of marriageable age. Because obviously, if he slept with her, she's not a virgin anymore. Although the fact that, that maiden, young married woman, or you could say, because of his false accusation and having to pay her back, her virginity is spiritually restored unto her. So actually, it is still fully appropriate to call her a virgin. And she shall be his wife. He may not divorce her all his days. I'll get that's a bit of a tricky translation. I'll get into that. But if the thing is true that the evidence of virginity was not found in the young woman, then they shall bring out the young woman to the door of her father's house, and the men of her city shall stone her to death with stones, because she has done an outrageous thing in Israel by whoring in her father's house. So you shall purge the evil or the evil one from your midst. So what I just read is another passage that is pretty controversial these days, right? A lot of modern day people don't like hearing this commandment. It's not the most controversial one we've ever read. It's not most controversial one we're gonna read, but it's, you know, it's definitely one that modern day audiences have a tendency not to like to hear. Right? So, some before I get into the great depths of this one, I will point out this command that if it's proven that she was a virgin, that then he has to remain married to her, and he can never divorce her. You might ask the question, if he's going to make such an accusation against her, why the hell would she want to be married to him? What if she wants to divorce him? Okay, it's saying, it is actually implying in that sentence, if she wants to still be married, he can't just throw her out at that point and put her on the streets with a bad name, obviously because she won the trial. So that she still has the power to divorce him and to annul the marriage. He does not have that power anymore because he was shown to want to just use women, to, bed women, and then say, nah, you sold me to her father. You sold me, bad goods. Here's back your daughter that I just had sex with. Give me back my money that I gave in exchange for her, and then goes off and ruins a bunch of women that way, right? Some men might do that. This commandment is stopping that, right? It's meant so the men cannot use a woman like that. So, right? So that's what's happening there. And you'll notice that, whenever he accuses this woman, not only if she still wants to be married to him, can he not divorce her, but he, regardless to whether she wants to stay with him or not, he has to pay 100 silver shekels. That's several thousands of dollars. You know, basically the amount of money that he's paying her family is enough for her to live on for the entire rest of her life if she doesn't want to be with him. It's really enshrining the sacredness of a woman and a good woman there. Right? Now, if you notice here with that towards the end here, it says, but if it was proven that she was guilty, that she shall be stoned to death for whoring herself out while she was still in her father's house. Right? Now, I will point out here that this thing is very conditional based on the start of this. And that is, if this woman was, I'll use God's word here, pouring herself out under her father's care. Well, at the same time, her and her father were both knowingly trying to pass her off as a virgin. And therefore, when signing the marriage contract with this man and his family, they lied about her state of being. They claimed that she was a virgin when she wasn't, in order to get a higher bridal price from his family, which I've explained that in detail before, right? And in order to get her with maybe a better man than what she could have gotten if the truth was out. Her and her father are deceiving this man, and they're deceiving his family. Okay? So where is the sin in this? The sin is in her and her father trying to deceive their fellow man. Kind of like the whole man dressing as a woman or a woman dressing as a man. The sin there is deceiving someone else. It's lying, right? So in this case, instead of lying and pretending to be a woman when you're really a man, in this case, it's lying and pretending to be a virgin when you're not. right? You're fooling the man, right? Now, hey, not every woman remained a virgin until marriage. Ideally, they would, and ideally, a man would too, right? Ideally, both would remain virgins until marriage. But we know the ideal doesn't always happen, right? And hey, just as long as the other person knows it, right? Yes, that might affect um, what man chooses to be with her, right? It might affect the amount of money that that man or his family might be willing to offer. Um, remember, I've said before, the bridal price was something that was put in the contract, so that if the man ever divorced the woman, that the woman would be well taken care of until she either found a new husband or well taken care of for the rest of her life. That's what it was. It was not him buying her. It was something, it was money given to her family so that if they ever got a divorce, that she'd be well taken care of. And likewise, her family had to give money to his family as well. That way, likewise. So that's the dowry. That's the money from the bride's family to the groom's family. So, see, you can imagine that if someone lied in order to get more money in that arrangement, you're deceiving someone. So that's a sin, and that's what it's talking about here. Now, see, if a man then did sleep with a virgin and then tried to get his money back, trying to claim that the family deceived him, but then if it turns out that he was lying, oh yeah, he's whipped or disciplined, has to pay a lot of money out. And then the original money he paid, they get to keep also. And so, woo, on top of that, an extra 100 shekels. Oh, you know. So yeah, that man doesn't want to lie. And the woman and her father also don't want to lie. This command is very much about lying, isn't it? About misrepresenting yourself. Right? See, it's very similar to that command about not dressing as the other gender. Very similar, same principles. Now, the part that remains sounding archaic, I've covered most of that stuff. I've made it very modern. The part that remains, I haven't, uh, made modern yet. Obviously, is the whole shall bring proof that she was a virgin, shall show the shall spread the cloak before the elders, right? So if you read medieval stories or ancient stories, they talk about how the sheet that the couple had sex on, how then the next day it was pinned up in their bedroom window to show proof that the girl was a virgin. Okay, that many cultures throughout the world. Now, modern day listeners will know that, especially modern day women, oftentimes, by the time they get married, even if they are virgins, usually they don't have a hymen anymore, and usually they don't bleed when having sex. And that's because women these days are usually more athletic. And if you take part in any sports, there's a high chance that you've torn your hymen. I know, getting very adult every week here, right? Also, something as simple as riding a bike can tear your hymen, or else and Amber went away. Either she had bad connection or she went to bed. Who knows? Oh no. She probably got tired. It's all right. I'll continue with the story. So, riding a bike can tear your hymen. Climbing a tree can tear your hymen. Girls do all those things these days when they're very young. So there's a lot of 5-year-old girls out there these days that have no hymen, and they're still virgins. But yeah, if they had sex, there may or may not be evidence. Okay, so being aware that modern day women do a lot of things that usually tear the hymen at a very young age. Um, that whole showing the sheep thing is not really applicable these days for the most part. And, some people think that women shouldn't be doing all those activities. They think that they should be not riding bikes and not climbing trees. There are some people who feel that way. Um, I'm not saying that a girl shouldn't do those things. I'm just saying that some people do feel that way. Um, you know, that being said, a woman could do those things and bleed. Now, of course, the big horror stories that you hear is in Muslim countries. In order to make sure that a woman bleeds, they do what's called female circumcision, where this is going to be so gory. I apologize, but the Bible is not for children here, so I'm about to say something really terrible. All right, they will in a lot of Muslim countries, they will cut off part of a woman's outer labia, and then they will take thread or stitches, and they will stitch up a woman's um, um, external vulva, and they will stitch up until it's just the little hole um, for them to pee out of. Okay, and then because they cut or scraped the outer part, whenever that heals, it merges the flesh into one, and it's too small for a penis to enter through. So then, whenever the woman loses her virginity, whenever the man has sex with her, it will absolutely tear and rip her open, and will absolutely cause bleeding. And as you can hear, this is a rather horrible procedure. Also, making it just that little hole to go pee. Um, the woman gets a lot of urinary infections and yeast infections because of this. So it's horrible. All right. I don't condone the female circumcision. That's what that's called. Um, I don't condone that. The Bible does not condone that. Um, okay. So I want to make that clear. But yeah, that's a sign that some people do in mostly Muslim countries and parts of Africa as well, in order to make sure that a woman bleeds on the sheets. Um, all in all, to close the topic of this little topic of sin, I would say, men, understand that your woman may not have a hymen anymore, but she might still be a virgin. Don't accuse a woman of not being a virgin, even if she doesn't bleed. Not all women bleed. Also, as I pointed out, even back then, not all women who got married were virgins. Accept it. Have communication with one another. Okay? If you want to absolutely marry a virgin, make that clear on your first dates. All right? If the woman's not a virgin at that point, hopefully she's going to say you're a prick and she's going to not date you. Which, if you want a virgin, that's good. You're not wasting your time on a woman who's not at that point, right? And then if you're a woman and you're not a virgin, good. You're not wasting your time on an asshole, right? And that's the guy in this story, very well could be an asshole in this little example here that was given, right? So don't waste your time on an asshole, right? If you truly want a virgin, don't waste your time on one that isn't at that point, right? Make it clear. Okay? So communication is key, people. And don't deceive, don't lie about your status. That's all I can say there. Right? And if a woman says she's a virgin, believe her, even if she doesn't bleed. Because guess what? A lot of modern day little girls do a lot of strenuous activity. Okay? That's my comment on that. Right. We move on. If a man is found lying with the wife of another man, both of them shall die. The man who lay with the woman and the woman. So you shall purge the evil or the evil one from Israel. That, of course, is forbidding adultery. Now, I would like to make something clear here. There's a difference between adultery and lechery. Okay? Adultery is sleeping with someone else's husband or someone else's wife. Right? Now, if a married person has sex with an unmarried person, meaning they cheat on their spouse, that is actually not adultery. Adultery is only whenever you are taking someone else's wife. So, for instance, let's say, a man is married to a woman and he cheats on her with an unmarried woman. That unmarried woman is committing adultery. She's stealing a woman's husband. That man, however, is committing lechery. Lechery is he's cheating on his wife with an unmarried woman. That's lechery. He's committing lechery at that point. Or if a woman is married to a man and that woman has sex with an unmarried man, she's committing lechery. And that man is committing adultery. Let's be clear with the terms here. All right? Obviously, the sin for adultery is death. But as mentioned, it's pretty strict rules. You have to have 2 or 3 witnesses and has to be before a court of judges. So, if there is a betrothed virgin and a man meets her in the city and lies with her, then you shall bring them both out to the gate of that city, and you shall stone them to death with stones. The young woman, because she did not cry for help, though she was in the city, and the man, because he violated his neighbor's wife. So you shall purge the evil from your midst. But if in the open country a man meets a young woman who is betrothed, and the man seizes her and lies with her, then only the man who lay with her shall die. But you shall do nothing to the young woman. She has committed no offense punishable by death. For this case is like that of a man attacking and murdering his neighbor, because he met her in the open country. And though the betrothed young woman cried for help, there was no one to rescue her. If a man meets a virgin who is not betrothed and seizes her and lies with her, and they are found, then the man who lay with her shall give to the father of the young woman 50 shekels of silver, and she shall be his wife, because he has violated her. He may not divorce her all his days. So, that whole section of multiple commandments that we just read there are all ones that are also, again, really controversial in the modern world. Like, insanely. People get really upset about these commandments that I just read. But again, it's a bit of a misunderstanding of what it's saying that's going on here. All right. And of course, some people are going to get upset no matter what. All right. So, what is it saying here? I will say that modern day psychology might explain away why one aspect of the first one that we're going to talk about might not actually be the kindest or most logical, but we'll get into that later. So, the first, because we had two of these commandments I just read were highly related. All of them were related in that they were clearly about someone having sex with someone. So, first, I will say that if you're reading the King James Version, these commandments sound a lot more disturbing. For here's why. So let me just go back and read the first of these three commandments. If there is a betrothed virgin and a man meets her in the city and lies with her, in the King James there, it says, if there is a betrothed virgin and a man comes upon her in the city and rapes her. Okay? So in the King James one, it says that if a man rapes a woman in the city, if she doesn't call out for help, that you're to kill the man and the woman he raped. You can see why that would be controversial, right? And then it says, but then if in the countryside he rapes her, you're only to kill him because even if she did call out, no one would have hurt her. Right? And then the next commandment, when read in the King James, says, if a man rapes a virgin and is caught in the act by her father, that then the man is to pay 50 shekels to the woman's father, and then the woman who he raped must marry him, and she cannot divorce him. You can see why people reading King James, modern day people reading King James, would be very upset at these three commandments. Oh boy, that's not good. It's sounding real terrible, right? You'll get a lot of atheists after reading that to some people. Whew. Right? So you will not be surprised to know that's not what it says. All right. Especially in that final one. The third one there is not talking about rape at all. Okay? The two above it could be talking about rape, though it could also be talking about, and the countryside one's definitely talking about rape. City one, kind of too, but that's not the only way to interpret them. But getting into it. So, ideally, a person would have stayed a virgin until marriage. So if a man comes upon a woman in the city and he has sex with her, right, and is discovered, right, it says they're both to be stoned to death because the woman did not cry out for help. Now, modern day psychology would give an explanation for why she did not cry out for help. Modern day psychology has come to the conclusion that usually when a woman is being raped, they, for various reasons, freeze up and kind of lay there and as the man brutalized it. And anyone who knows anything about situations of rape knows that that absolutely happens 99% of the time. It's sad, but it does. One of the reasons why the women freeze up is they're so shocked. They're in shock that they're being brutalized like this. And not even virgins. It doesn't matter. A woman can be not a virgin, could have had sex many times. But if a man is raping her, oftentimes they're going to freeze up in shock. I can't believe this is happening to me. They're going to freeze up. It's like as if their soul has left their body. And yeah, that happens a lot. Okay. Another reason why women don't usually call out whenever a man is attacking them is because usually if a man is trying to rape you and you call out, he's going to kill you. Like 85% of the time. So a woman has two options there. Lets him rape her and then he's done and she's alive, or calls out for help and he kills her. Which one do you think women choose? They usually just let the guy rape. That's what happened. All right. So, knowing that that is what usually happens here, through that modern lens, if one looks at this commandment, the first part of it anyway, about a girl being in the city and you kill them both because she didn't cry out for help, seems very barbaric, very inaccurate, very unjust. And that's how a lot of modern day people feel about this stuff. Like being honest with you about how people feel about it. It seems that way. So since God is a just and righteous God, and all of the words that he says are just and righteous, how can we reconcile this with the modern day understanding of psychology regarding rape scenarios, right? So the most sane way of understanding this, the way it makes the most sense, is what is God saying? He is saying, women, if at all possible, defend yourself, right? So God could be saying, girls, carry a knife on you, carry a gun on you, carry some mace, pepper spray, learn some martial arts, learn self-defense, right? Learn what to do in situations where you're being attacked, and learn how to defend yourself from the attacker, right? Also, you'll notice in this example, a woman's being raped, just to call out, right? Now, we know that women oftentimes cannot call for help while being raped, but a woman, of course, can afterwards. I know it's hard. It's like psychologically, it's hard for some women because sometimes it's your father, sometimes it's your brother, sometimes it's your cousin, sometimes it's your best friend. I know it can be psychologically hard, but what seems to be saying here is don't just let these men brutalize you. If at all possible, report it, right? Say, this man has violated me. That's calling out, right? Call out, report it. Say, this man has violated me. Help, this man has violated me. If at all possible, report it. And also, if all possible, defend yourself or find some way that you can be defended or rescued. So it's a lot of women, modern day women, have chosen to hate God because of this commandment. Even though this commandment is God saying he loves women, he supports them, and he wants them to be protected and defended, and he wants the women to stand up for themselves, right? That's what calling out means in this passage. You're to stand up for yourself, all right? So that's what that means. So if a woman is gets in a sexual situation with a man, and she chooses not to stand up for herself at any point during it. I mean, even afterwards, reporting the rape. So then this command seems to be assuming that then they are engaging in fornication, uh, which it's saying that they're both to be stoned to death. So, I mean, now again, in order for that to happen, 2 or 3 witnesses against you, go before a judge. Judges usually only killed about one person every 10 years, so chances are you wouldn't be stoned to death. But clearly, being caught in fornication, sex outside marriage, not recommended by God. Uh, right? Dangerous, get diseases, end up with unwanted pregnancies, and so on and so forth. So, wise not to engage in fornication. And if you're a woman, please stand up for yourself. Then the next part of that commandment was, but uh, if a woman's in a countryside, no matter what, it's always to assume that she did try and defend herself, but because there was no one there to hear her calls for help or to protect her, then she committed no crime. It's to be assumed that she never committed fornication at that point, and it was always against her will, and therefore only the man is to be punished for this fornication and not the woman. Right? There you go. So, but either way, even if you live in the countryside, yeah, learn self-defense, girls. To the best of your ability, learn how to react in such a scenario and how to defend yourself. Um, you know, as a father of a daughter, that you know, whenever in a few years from now, I'm definitely buying my daughter some mace. I'll tell you that. I'm not a gun person, so I won't be buying her a gun, but I'll definitely be giving my daughter a can of pepper spray to wear attached to her pants or whatever. So, or for her to attach to her purse. That way she can have it with her while she's wearing a dress too. Also, if it was within my power to control this aspect of my daughter's life that I'm about to list, I would also enroll my daughter in a school that teaches women how to overpower men. That way, a man could not take advantage of my daughter either. But sadly, enrolling my daughter in self-defense classes is not something that I have power over in my daughter's life. I wish I did. All right. So then the third of those ones, which again in King James still says rape, but is not actually about rape, is that if a man has sex with a virgin who is not betrothed, and they're caught in the act, that he is to pay 50 shekels of silver. That's a lot of money. That's half of that 100 shekels from earlier. And she shall be his wife, and he may not divorce her all his days. Now, again, like earlier, look at the wording there. He may not divorce her. She's allowed to divorce him, though. Okay? So, what that one's actually talking about is consensual sex. That's talking about if two young people who are not betrothed to anyone else choose to have sex with one another, and they're caught in the act. I mean, if he's reduced her bridal price because she's not a virgin anymore, or she's reduced her own bridal price, obviously, at that point. Then the father and the man and the woman have the option, that's based on this word, it's probably advisable that if they loved each other, which if you're having sex with each other, you better have loved each other. Right? If they loved each other, it's proper then, if all parties agree, for the man to pay the bridal price, 50 shekels, and then marry her. Now, because he's had sex with her outside of marriage, he cannot then go, oh, we don't get along. I don't like her. And then divorce her in the next week. That, then that would kind of tie into that thing earlier, but well, she wasn't a virgin. Well, you took her virginity, you idiot. Outside, this guy's clearly a sleazeball at that point, right? So this saying no. A guy cannot change his mind a week later and say, I want, different girl. You have, you made your bed, lay in it, right? You slept with this girl. Yeah, no. Now, if she doesn't want to marry him or she wants to divorce him, it's a different case. But this commandment is to prevent, men sleeping with woman after woman after woman, defiling, all the women they can. All right. And this commandment is, again, one of those that we see in Genesis. This commandment is in play with the story of what's traditionally called the rape of Dinah. And, that's the daughter of Jacob. His daughter Dinah, some interpret it as was raped by a prince of a particular people. However, that's really a misunderstanding of it. She had consensual sex out of wedlock with this prince. And the prince loved her. He wanted to marry her. She loved him. She wanted to marry him. The man and his father went to her father, Jacob, and said, hey, can we marry your daughter? And Jacob said, yeah, as long as you get circumcised and follow our God. And the guy went, all right. So you have to also have everyone who lives in your town also get circumcised and follow our God. And the guy said, okay. And then the guy happily got circumcised, and then that story all rolls downhill and goes to a bad place, as then Dinah's brothers are like, no, this guy defiled our sister. And so as all the people in the town are recovering from circumcision, two of her brothers go into the town and kill every person in the town. And then they get in trouble for having done that. All right. So, see, this commandment was in play here too, right? The guy and the girl, they were having consensual sex, and the guy was willing to marry her. So, he was following it. That's why her brothers got in trouble, because they then did something very bad, right? So, there you go. So that is those three commandments there. Again, very controversial to modern day audiences. Whether I made them less controversial or not, I can't say. I tried to explain what they really mean. But I know some people still won't be happy with where it concluded. Sorry. So, we move on. A man shall not take his father's wife, so that he does not uncover his father's nakedness. So don't have sex with your stepmother. And definitely don't have sex with your mother. Again, that's spoken of in the previous chapters. So next one. No one whose testicles are crushed or whose male organ is cut off shall enter the assembly of God. The assembly of Yahuwah. Shall enter shall enter the assembly of Yahuwah. So, of course, assembly can also be translated as church. So no one whose testicles have been crushed or cut off, or whose penis has been cut off, shall enter the church of God. This one sometimes raises up questions from men. And that is, well, what if they were accidentally crushed by an animal, right? Does that mean that you're no longer welcome with God? Or else another question is, well, what if you had a testicular cancer and they had to be cut off because of that to save your life? Are you no longer welcome in the assembly of God? Good questions to ask. I understand people ask those questions. Again, it falls down into intent. Okay. Did you purposely intend to, without reason, have crushed or removed a working testicle or penis? That's the question there. So, if they're accidentally crushed by an animal, that's an accident, man. You didn't choose that. You did not sin at that point, right? It was an accident from an animal. You are still welcome in the assembly of God. Or if they were cancerous, they were no longer functional, right? And remove it in order to save your life. They were useless at that point anyway. Again, I mean, you were going to die. They were trying to kill you. So, right? So then, see, it's the question of intent, right? Now, if you had perfectly working testicle and a penis, because it says they're male organ, that means their penis. If they're working perfectly fine, and you on purposely choose to mutilate yourself and cut off your balls and penis, then yeah, it's saying you're not part of the Church of God. That's directly what's saying. Now again, some modern day people will get upset about that. They'll say that's an anti-trans statement. Indeed, it appears to be so. I didn't write it. I'm only reading it and explaining it. Okay? And, again, if someone thinks, I'm being anti-trans here, just remember here, I also say it's a sin to eat shellfish and ham. So, right? It's not as much of a sin as eating ham or, stuff like that. So, right? So, and now again, remember, we're always talking about people who are choosing to follow God and then are being hypocrites and not following, right? So, again, God loves us. God made us what He wanted us to be. When we purposely choose to mutilate ourselves, to slash our wrists because we're depressed or someone dies, or to remove our testicles or our penis, when we're mutilating ourselves like that, it's a very sad situation of self-harm, right? We should learn to love ourselves, and we should learn to not hurt ourselves. Whenever we're sad or emotionally depressed or emotionally distressed, we should not cut ourselves. That's an earlier commandment you'll remember, right? Because we're to love ourselves. We love ourselves, we won't cut ourselves. We're commanded to love ourselves, right? But same token, if we love ourselves, we will learn to be happy in the bodies that the Almighty has given us. And we will not mutilate ourselves. We will not have our breasts cut open and have silicone jammed in them to make our breasts bigger, right? We will not have Botox injected into our face, take away our wrinkles, or we will not have collagen injected into our lips, make our lips more fuller. We'll be happy with what God has given us, right? Doing all of those things that I just listed indicates that we don't love ourselves, right? We're unhappy with ourselves, okay? So mutilating ourselves, various commandments say that is a sin, okay? Now, I've said before, now if someone has breast cancer and has to have a double mastectomy, it's okay then to get reconstructive surgery, which is breast implants, in order to look normal again. That's okay. That's not what God's talking about there. Okay, that's not what the command was talking about. If your face gets disfigured in a car accident, it's okay to have reconstructive surgery on your face. That's fine. All right. If you have cancer in your mouth and your lips are destroyed, it's okay to get reconstructive surgery and get fake lips at that point. It's okay. All right. But to get, um, you know, non-reconstructive body augmentations for vain reasons is a sign that one doesn't love themselves. And we should love ourselves. So, by that same token, a continuation upon that is if one hates themselves and hates their gender, to the point that they want to cut off their penis or their testicle, clearly you're at that point you're hating yourself. You're hating how God made you, and you're disfiguring, you're mutilating yourself. Or else an unnecessary double mastectomy, given for the reason that you were born a girl but you want to look like a man. Same issue goes on there, right? So a double mastectomy, fine if you have breast cancer, not fine if you don't. Right? That's what that's basically saying. We should be happy with what God gave us. By the way, I understand that then people could ask, well, how about breast reduction surgery? Well, again, if you're just doing it because you think they look too big and you want smaller breasts, that's a very vain reason, right? My mother and my sister both have uh, breasts that are around H cup or bigger. My mother, her breasts, I believe, are J cup, okay? And they never got breast reduction surgery. And I understand back pains and all of that. And I mean, if they're causing you severe pain, then maybe that's justifiable. That's between you and your doctor. That's none of my business, really. Okay. But you should, at first, if at all possible, try to love yourself as God made you. Okay. And again, you have free will. You can do whatever you want. And I'm not your judge. All right. So, that's with any of this stuff. All right. Even with a man cutting off his penis, I'm not his judge, man. I don't care if a man cuts off his penis. That's between him and the Almighty. All right. Wants to do it, that's on him. All right. I'm not going to hate him or her actually at that point, right? That trans woman. I'm not going to hate her. I'm not going to discriminate against her. I'm not even going to tell her necessarily what God says because I'm pretty sure that she already knows. Right? If she attends my studies here, I'll read this commandment to her. She'll find out what God thinks about it. Right? But no, I'm not their judge. So I don't have anything against them. You know, they be them. My job is to follow God to the best of my ability. How much they do or don't want to do it, that's on them. Right? All right. So that is what a man who cuts off or crushes his testicle or penis is to be cut off from the assembly of God. That's what that means. Okay. Again, I did not write it. We go forward. Tonight's going to be a long night, isn't it? No one born of a forbidden union may enter the assembly of Yahuwah, even to the 10th generation. None of his descendants may enter the assembly of Yahuwah. So what it means by forbidden union there is remember it. Remember, this is a summary. So let's go back to the longer versions. Like, what does it say? What is this forbidden union? What does that mean? So it's talking about the Canaanites and Israelites marrying Canaanites. Okay, and so that's what it is talking about. And it is from the time that this is being said all the way down to the 10th generation afterwards. And, the Canaanites, the Ammonites, the Moabites, so on and so forth. So we'll get into it next. No Ammonite or Moabite may enter the assembly of Yahuwah, even to the 10th generation. None of them may enter the assembly of Yahuwah forever, because they did not meet you with bread and with water on the way when you came out of Egypt, and because they hired against you Balaam, the son of Beor, from Pethor of Mesopotamia, to curse you. But Yahuwah your Elohim would not listen to Balaam. Instead, Yahuwah your Elohim turned the curse into a blessing for you, because Yahuwah your Elohim loved you. You shall not seek their peace or their prosperity all your days forever. You shall not abhor an Edomite, for he is your brother. You shall not abhor an Egyptian, because you were sojourners in his land. Children born to them in the 3rd generation may enter the assembly of Yahuwah. So, all those commandments there had to deal with marriages with other peoples and whether they were allowed to become one of God's people. Now, you might read that and go, wait a minute here. It said a Moabite shall not forever. How about Ruth? Ruth, like great grandmother or whatever of King David, ancestor of Jesus. Wasn't she a Moabite? Good question to ask there, right? So there's a few reasons given to why that is not applicable to Ruth. One reason that's given is that she converted to being an Israelite. She's no longer a Moabite at that point. It's talking about marriages where the person does not convert. She converted. So, problem solved there. That's probably the most likely explanation. Pretty good one. Right? Another reason that could be given is that she was a woman. That being said, though, we do know that marrying a Canaanite woman was not allowed. So, really, the conversion one is the more likely explanation there. Another very interesting explanation, which I once heard, but not everyone agrees with, is that Some people have postulated that perhaps when it says that Ruth was a Moabite, it meant that she was an Israelite who was born in Moab. Thus, she was also a Moabite, but she was an Israelite. That's another one that is given there. Some people disagree with that. Um, so, because then she wouldn't have necessarily had to convert, and her story is a very famous conversion story. So, yeah. Anyway, so the fact that it then instantly mentions the Ammonites and the Moabites and the Edomites being children of Esau, and the Egyptians, that tells us that that earlier line about forbidden unions was talking about the Canaanites. All right. So there you go there. But because the Edomites are the descendants of Esau, they're the brother of Jacob, brother of Israel, and because the people were sojourners, foreigners residing in Egypt, and they were welcome and treated good by Egypt at first. So because of all that, after a third generation, they could enter the assembly of the Almighty. Right? So there you go. Now, but then someone could ask, well, wait a minute here. Then how come with the Ammonites and the Moabites it said forever, but if they convert, then it's okay. But then with the Edomites and the Egyptians, it's after a third generation. Well, what if a generation before that wants to convert? Well, then isn't it okay because they convert? I know it might get complicated. Uh, I'd say we've already been doing this for over 2.5 hours. Do you really want me to get into that much nitty gritty of this? Right? Probably not. Good. I don't want to get into the snake and gritty either. Yeah, it's complicated. That's all I can say there. Okay. All right. Moving forward. When you are encamped against your enemies, then you shall keep yourself from every evil thing. If any man among you becomes unclean because of a nocturnal emission, that's because of either a wet dream or masturbation, then he shall go outside the camp. He shall not come inside the camp, but when evening comes, he shall bathe himself in water, and as the sun sets, he may come inside the camp. You shall have a place outside the camp, and you shall go out to it, and you shall have a trawl with your tools, and when you sit down outside, you shall dig a hole with it, and turn back and cover up your excrement when you go crap. Because Yahuwah your Elohim walks in the midst of your camp to deliver you and to give up your enemies before you. Therefore, your camp must be holy or set apart, so that he may not see anything indecent among you and turn away from you. So you'll remember the last time that we read these, it also mentioned about if a woman is menstruating or if a person has leprosy or a visible illness, and all that stuff as well. And it also mentioned about if your clothing gets moldy and whatnot, right? So, and also mentioned, if you had a pussy, you know, um, pus on your skin and stuff. So anyway, um, so you'll remember that what this was saying is that uh, if you have, if you are menstruating or if you've ejaculated on yourself or on any of your clothing, or if you're sick, that you are to not touch anyone or anything until you have bathed, right? So I could go into more detail, but I did that when we read all that before. But, just it's saying that stuff might not be the cleanest stuff in the world. You might want to bathe, right? All right. Then, with the feces, it's saying, uh, cover up your shit. Don't just leave it around the ground for people to walk in because, ew, right? So be sanitary, be clean. And really, that's what both of those, they're both talking about be clean, be sanitary, right? Because again, God cares about your health and safety and health and safety of the people around you. Kind of like how, a related commandment, which we read a few months ago, said if you're sick, you're to cover up your mouth and go around telling everyone you're unclean, right? So again, God cares about your health and everyone else's health, right? God talks a lot about washing, right? You're to wash after all this. And your poop and your piss, make it so people don't step in it. Right? Makes sense. All right. You shall not give up to his master a slave or a servant who has escaped from his master to you. He shall dwell with you in your midst, in the place that he shall choose within one of your towns. Wherever it suits him, you shall not wrong him. Interesting there, right? So, think about the United States Civil War, right? If a slave has escaped their master and come to you for safety from their master, you're to not give that slave back up to the master. You are to protect them and give them refuge. There you go. Okay, very nice. None of the daughters of Israel shall be a cult prostitute, and none of the sons of Israel shall be a cult prostitute. You shall not bring the fee of a prostitute, or the wages of a dog, by their dog means male prostitute, into shall not bring the wages of a bitch into the house of Yahuwah your Elohim in payment for any vow, for both of these are an abomination to Yahuwah your Elohim. So you'll notice there, it was not banning prostitution, it's banning cult prostitution. I just want to point that out. All right. We talked about prostitution earlier. As I said, where prostitution itself is banned or not, a bit vague. Pimping, definitely banned. Cult prostitution, definitely banned. So, you might ask, what is a cult prostitute? Good question. A lot of modern day people wouldn't know what that is. So, back in pagan times, a cult prostitute was a type of priest or priestess who worked for the temple of a god or goddess. And as part of their service to that god or goddess, they would pour themselves out to people. All right. So that could be a way for a temple to gain income, obviously. But also it was so with certain fertility goddesses or fertility gods, that was also a way that they worship their god or their goddess, was by having sex on the altar for that god or goddess. So this commandment is saying that Yahuwah Elohim, God Almighty, shall not be worshipped in that way. Right? And then it also says that money that is gained through prostitution shall not go towards the upkeep of the temple, right? So that money is abominable, right? The money that comes from that is a no-no, right? So again, I talked about pagan temples raising funds through cult prostitution, right? Now, you'll notice though that whenever it then says that money gained for prostitution shall not be given to the temple as part of the vow, You'll notice that it doesn't say cult prostitution on that line. It just says prostitution. Now, here's where it gets interesting here. There are old Jewish writings that are from more recent than the time of Jesus, but from around the time of Jesus, from around his lifetime and a little bit later, that give the opinions of certain rabbis. One of these rabbis that their opinions were recorded and written down is like Yeshua of the Galilee. So that means that might be Yeshua, it might be Jesus being recorded in Jewish shrines. Weird, right? So interesting enough, in one of these writings, someone asked this Yeshua of the Galilee, you know how the Pharisees were always asking him questions to test him, right? So someone asks him, is it appropriate to use money from prostitution for the temple? And this Yeshua of the Galilee, in this Jewish writing, gave this hilarious response. He said, only for fixing up and cleaning the toilets, as money that is gained from abomination should go to repair abomination. Money gained from shit should go for repairing shit. Okay. There you go. All right. Makes sense. Whew. So, but yeah, so no money gained from prostitution should go for buying holy items or set apart items. All right. Simple command there. And God does not want to be worshiped through prostitution. Cult prostitution, temple prostitution. Okay? So, all right, there we go. Not exactly banning prostitution, but it's making statements about particular types of prostitution and banning particular types of it. All right. Which, if you want to extend it to banning all prostitution, maybe that's what it's saying, but it's not clear on that. All right. By the way, you notice we got the word whore and prostituting dog mentioned. Whore and bitch. Yeah, God just uses those words, right? All right, well, there you go. I can't make it child friendly. There's no way. I just can't. All right. You shall not charge interest on loans to your brother, interest on money, interest on food, interest on anything that is lent for interest. You may charge a foreigner. In this instance, it means someone who does not believe or follow the Almighty. You may charge a foreigner interest, but you may not charge your brother interest. That Yahuwah, by your brother, it means a follower of God. That Yahuwah, your Elohim, may bless you in all that you undertake in the land that you are entering to take possession of it. So, we've read this before, because we've read all these before. That one, don't charge interest, called usury. And it's a sin. And even Christians consider this a sin and outlawed usury, even into the Middle Ages. Usury or charge interest being allowed by people is a modern day thing. Followers of God, both Jewish and Christian, historically did not allow it. Okay? Because it's using people and it's stealing from them. So there you go. If you make a vow to Yahuwah your Elohim, you shall not delay fulfilling it, for Yahuwah your Elohim will surely require it of you, and you will be guilty of sin. But if you refrain from vowing, you will not be guilty of sin. You shall be careful to do what has passed your lips, for you have voluntarily vowed to Yahuwah your Elohim what you have promised with your mouth. So I've actually talked at length about this before, probably because we've read all these before. So in the New Testament, someone asks Jesus about this, and he gives the same answer. He says, it's better to not make a vow, because if you make a vow, surely you shall have to, pay for it. Shall either have to keep it or you shall pay for not keeping it, right? So Yeshua quotes this exact verse right there. And when I mentioned this before, I told all of you about how much more earlier this year, at the beginning of the year, a young woman who was 17, she approached me, and she was greatly distressed because she had vowed earlier when she was 15 or 16 to never drink alcohol. And she at age 17 had just went to a party and drunk alcohol and gotten drunk. And she was devastated and didn't know what to do. She felt horrible. So she asked me for my religious advice. And I told her several commandments that applied to her situation. Right? One of them was that first told her drinking alcohol is not a sin. Getting drunk is a sin, but drinking alcohol is not. So, there's that. Now, she did drink alcohol and she did get drunk, but, wanted to let her know drinking is not a sin. That, that vow of hers was a needless vow, right? Next thing that I, of course, told her was because she was 17 and still living in her father's house, was even younger than that, and she made the vow, as we've already read here in Scripture, a young woman who is still living with her father, if she makes a vow, her father, when he finds out about that vow, can annul it. So, this little girl living in her father's house made a vow about something that isn't even a sin. Well, she's young and living in her father's house. It's annulled at that point. So her vow ceases to exist at that point. Right? She made a silly vow. Right? Now, that being said, I told her this next part, and that was, but if you make a vow to God, if at all possible, you really should keep it, which is what this says. So, my advice to her was, if she felt that she could go forward without ever drinking again, she should keep her vow. That being said, she was young when she made it. She was still living with her father. The vow is annulled, right? So, especially because drinking is not a sin. I then also advised her she should not be going to parties and getting drunk, regardless of how old or young she is, because that's dangerous for a person to go to a party and get drunk, because then you could be taken advantage of and raped. So being drunk is a sin. Don't go to parties and get drunk. That's dangerous. If you love yourself, you won't do that. So that was my advice to her. Don't go to parties and get drunk. If all possible, keep your vow. If not, you're allowed to drink alcohol. you know. So there you go. That was my advice to her. That deeply ties into what we just read about if you make a vow to the Almighty, you are to fill it as soon as possible. And if it, at all possible, you probably shouldn't make vows that you might not be able to keep. Right? So there you go. If you go into your neighbor's vineyard, you may eat your fill of grapes, as many as you wish, but you shall not put any in your bag. If you go into your neighbor's standing grain, you may pluck the ears with your hand, but you shall not put a sickle to your neighbor's standing grain. So that command there is called gleaning. There are several other commandments about gleaning. The other corresponding commandments are for the owners of the field. And here's what it says. It says, when you have a field and when you have fruit trees, so an orchard or a field, you are not to harvest to the edges of your field. And whenever you're plucking fruits, that you are to purposely leave some. And it said the reason to not, and it also says that, and whenever you are doing the plucking and you are doing the harvesting, that you are not to double back and do a second plucking or a second harvesting in order to make sure you get everything. And the reason you're not to do that is it says that you are to leave a little bit of all your produce for the poor, the widows, and the orphans. Okay? For those who are hungry or in need and have no money. Then the commands that we just read is on the corresponding other side. And that is whenever you go out into these fields to glean, that is to get the stuff that's left for the poor and the needy, you are to only take what you need to survive. Don't take more than what you need to survive, because then you might not use all of it and it might go bad. And then you took stuff that could have been eaten by other people who were in need, and you left them to starve, and you wasted food. And we already know what God thinks about wasting food, right? Not okay. And stealing from the poor, not okay. Right? Even if you're another poor person, to steal from a poor person, not okay. So, what's saying there is that we are to care about the poor, even if we are poor, and we are to not waste food. We are to share things with people who are in need. When a man takes a wife and marries her, if then she finds no favor in his eyes, because he has found some indecency in her, and he writes her a certificate of divorce, and puts it in her hand, and sends her out of his house, and she departs out of his house, and if she goes and becomes another man's wife, and the latter man hates her, and writes her a certificate of divorce, and puts it in her hand, and sends her out of his house, or if the latter man dies, who took her to be his wife, then her former husband, who sent her away, may not take her again to be his wife, after she has been defiled, for that is an abomination before Yahuwah. And you shall not bring sin upon the land that Yahuwah your Elohim is giving you for an inheritance. So, what that is saying that is after you've divorced with someone, if they've then gone off and remarried and then divorced that person, and then they're not allowed if they want to follow God, obviously, because we have free will. If they want to follow God, God really suggests that they don't remarry at that point. Okay. Now, if you were married to someone, you got a divorce, and you remarried that person without marrying anyone else, that seems to be okay. But to marry someone else, then get a divorce from them or become widowed by them, and then remarry that previous spouse, God recommends not doing that. Okay? And you can imagine there could be various reasons for that, right? If you want to go to health reason, obviously, if the other person had a disease, you might then catch that disease, right? That makes sense there. Another reason can be because, well, now they're that person's wife at that point, and now then that's just nope at that point, right? And lastly, it could be if both persons divorce that other person, first you and then someone else, do you really want to marry that again? Right? Good question. That commandment actually is something that I kind of have to deal with two of the primary women in my life. Gabrielle, the mother of my daughter, after being with me, she married Jonathan Keene, and she has now divorced him. So obviously, if Gabrielle got back with me, that would be a problem, right? With Ashley, it could be a similar issue. She was with me, then she was with Jeff, right? Married him, divorced with him, then with me again, right? Now, I could say I could see God's wisdom. Probably unwise for me to get with either of those two women again. That being said, I am possibly a great idiot. I might be a little stupid. But God's great wisdom probably tells me what I should do in those scenarios. That being said, what if in neither of those cases was I married to those women? What if I just slept with them, right? Well, then, does this still apply? Well, in the Bible, if you have sex with someone, you are seemingly married to them. Scripture, we've read a lot of those commandments here. It seems to make that clear. But that's a factor in there because I never was married to Gabrielle, so who knows, right? How that would apply there. With Ashley and with Gabrielle, there's another little thing there that would make it. I'm giving these examples because the examples that might be cases in your lives too. Another issue with that would be, you know what? So let's say that Gabrielle and I having sex did count as biblical marriage. All right, fine then. She was kidnapped from my house by her evil aunt while she was pregnant with our child. I did not write a certificate of divorce. I never divorced Gabrielle. I never gave her permission to divorce me. I never signed a thing divorcing with her, right? So, okay, fine then. Then you know what? Her marriage to Jonathan Keene was illegitimate. I never gave her permission to marry him, right? Therefore, by that token, her marriage and her divorce to him are invalid. She was never married to him. He was committing adultery and she was committing lechery. So him having committed adultery, biblically, bad news for him. Her committing lechery, that's actually up to me as her husband on what I want to do about that. I biblically have a right to divorce her at that point if I want to. Well, if I don't want to, right? That's a good question. Then. Very similar scenario for Ashley. I was never legally married to her, but her and I, we did do a little private ceremony, which could be considered a religious ceremony. If so, guess what? So she's actually been married twice since then, to Jeff and then later to Floyd. But you know what? I never gave her permission to marry them. She's been married and divorced to both of those men. Well, I never gave her permission to. Therefore, those marriages are invalid. Still my wife? Okay, fine. Then an unfaithful wife. She cheated on me. All right, whatever. You know, I don't care. I still love Ashley greatly. Am I an idiot? Sure. Should I maybe not take her back? Sure. Would that be wise? Yeah. Am I the smartest person in the world? No. Am I an idiot? Sure. May in future ones of these in a few months, may you see me with Ashley at my side? Maybe. Why? I'm an idiot. No, maybe it's just me, being dedicated to my wife and not giving up on her, even if she chose to commit lechery. Right? It's me being a loving and forgiving husband. So there you go. So that's that. But God speaks words of true wisdom, and I may be an idiot. So should I get back with either of those women? Probably not. You shall not remarry them. So that's that commandment. How well I follow that commandment, it's a bit shaky. Okay. One of these days, I expect Ashley is going to listen to this recording. Probably gonna hate me for it, but just being honest there. Also, I've had this discussion with her many times, so she's aware of it. Well aware of it. She knows it. And yeah, my stance on that is I never gave her permission to marry them. So never divorced her. I never wrote her certificate of divorce. So, there we go. That's my trying to get around that commandment there. All right. See, where was I? I believe I was here. When a man is newly married, this is the one that I was talking about the other week. I wish Amber was still here to hear this, because she heard me refer to it like last week or the week before. I think it was last week, but she was here to actually read it. So, when a man is newly married, he shall not go out with the army or be liable for any other public duty. He shall be free at home 1 year to be happy with his wife, whom he has taken. I just said that, I believe it was last week. I explained with the mezuzahs and with the crushing the wedding glass and taking the glass and putting it in a second container within the mezuzah for your first year of being married. That way they knew not to solicit you or to call you into work or to call you into the military. So you'd have the first year in order to please your wife and get to know her, right? There you go. There's that one that I went into great detail in last week. Here it is in Scripture. If you're wondering where it was, right there. And that's a way of God showing that He wants us to, become close with our spouse and love them and start a family and start children without, without being disturbed, right? And if you remember the last week's one, it mentioned about last week we were reading about rules on the army, and it said if a man is recently married, don't put him in the army. If a man has just bought a new house, don't put him in the army. If a man has just bought a farm, don't put him in the army. Remember? So, see, that was telling the army what to do there. Now it's saying to the man, if you're married, you're not to go into the army or do any public duty. Right. No one shall take a mill or an upper millstone in pledge, for that would be taking a life in pledge. Well, I'm a bit rusty on that one. I honestly could not tell you the deeper meaning of what I just read. Obviously, a millstone, so the upper millstone, right? A millstone was a piece of rock um, that was used when with grinding things. Okay, so that's what a millstone was, and shall not take one in a pledge. I don't know what that means. I think what that means, I think I've figured it out. I think that means that if someone is poor and they're trying to sell you things in order to pay back their debt, you are not to take items that are their livelihood, ways that they make a living. Or if you did that, then, as it says, for that would be taking a life in a pledge. So if someone is a miller, right, then if you take away their millstone, you've just now caused them to fall into further debt with everyone, taking away their livelihood. And you've basically, restrict them to being a beggar on the street, and you've basically killed them, right? So that could be just don't take away someone's livelihood. Don't take away the way in which they earn their living. Which sadly in this modern day world that happens a lot these days. But that's not how God wants it. All right. I understood that fully. I'm quite impressed that God's gave me that wisdom. Thank you, Almighty. If a man is found stealing one of his brothers of the people of Israel, and if he treats him as a slave or sells him, then that thief shall die. So you shall purge the evil from your midst. So yeah, don't make slaves of your fellow believers in God. Right? Don't do that. So, kind of funny. By funny I mean sad. That you had back in the times of United States slavery, white slaves who would either slave owners, white slave owners who claimed to be Christians, who were also enslaving black and indigenous people. And along with enslaving them, they would Christianize these people and make them Christian. But then they'd keep these people as slaves. But if they're your fellow brothers in the faith, you're not to make them a slave. These people were being hypocrites then. They were being antichrist. And to follow Christ will not follow him. Great. All right? So, there you go. Take care in a case of leprous disease or visible disease. Be very careful to do according to all that the Levitical priests shall direct you.